Rites of Ascension. By C.V. Brawny. Chapter 99. Cauterize. The blast could be heard as far away as Shanghai, if one was in one of the quieter parts of that duchy. The ancient city nestled underground was made reasonably safe from infiltration by the reactivated security systems from another era, but the self-teleport siphon and its advanced technology was above ground and could be found by any pony. To prevent this, a spell only used once before was cast from within the main chamber of the siphon. Granted, it was cast without as much effort or desperation as before, but that still wouldn't stop the whole nation from wondering what the sound was. The answer was Sol Invitas. Not even the advanced materials of the pre-Discord era would be able to survive it. The entire siphon complex and quite a bit of Raging Mountains landscape around it was vaporized into dust. Unlike the other time this spell was cast, there would be no glass desert. The magma would melt and eat the leftovers by the time any pony got there to investigate. While the spell would certainly rattle ponies, the valley in which it was cast along with the mountains around it would absorb enough of the blast to prevent casualties. The light would likely confuse and disorient any pony too close, which in this case would likely be measured in hundreds, if not thousands of kilometers. The column of light and fire that was spawned by it reached high into the firmament, far above where any clouds had dared reach. Even deep in the Canterlet war room, the wind from the blast rattled every pony's ears. It was all they were talking about as twilight brought the element of honesty to a safe deep in the secure area, now under constant guard. With a spin and a ka-chunk, the safe closed tight. Wards sprang to life, dancing with light over the metal. It wasn't as grand or as powerful of a container as where they were once kept, but time didn't allow for an improved version just yet. Rainbow yawned and asked, "What's next?" Twilight's ear twitched. "Next, we get some rest and hit the archives. We're not done with the issues in Stalliongrad, and I have some threads to pull." Asterisk. The next morning, there was coffee. Sitting amongst a pile of paper, record books, and scrolls in the Royal Library was an entire pot of blonde roast, which had more caffeine than the usual dark stuff. The liquid awakening rushed through Twilight's system in minutes, and eventually, she realized there was a pony with glasses talking to her. "Oh, intelligentsia." Twilight paused mid-sip. "Were you saying something?" "I wasn't awake yet." The officer adjusted her glasses with a smile and took out one of many file packets. "I figured as much. I was just reciting poetry to see how long it would take you to notice. Now that you're awake, or at least caffeinated, I thought you might like some updates on some of the things you've passed to us to investigate." "Sure thing." Twilight re-rolled a scroll that she had allegedly read but whose contents she had no memory of. "What do you have for me?" "Well, that cult you found in the desert that fought the Titan? The all-male one aside from the female leader? I'm afraid there's not a whole lot we can do about them. The compact provides extremely strong protections for religious freedom, provided we're not talking about the worship of alicorns." Twilight grumbled. "And since the rumors of them firing on ponies flying through are still just rumors, there's not a lot else we can get them on." "Right. We gave them a stern talking to so that they know we're watching. Hopefully they behave now." Jen put away the first packet and pulled out another. "The next one is a bit more grim. We've investigated and cleared Agent Cobb, but we've found definitive evidence that Agent Squeakers is compromised." Twilight coughed up some coffee that went down her esophagus. "Really?" Jen pulled out a few summary pages of a rather large report. "Basically, we ran through her work from the last few years. We've found deliberate errors in a number of cases that would have been harmful to investigations. The fact that she was selective and extremely clever about the sabotage, her errors would have been possibly innocent if they only happened once or twice, tells us this is a pattern. We're conducting tests on her in the castle's dungeon to determine if she is under a guise, but for minor applications of the guise, we still don't have a reliable way to tell." "Hey!" Twilight sipped more coffee. "So, Farrier mentioning Cobb was a lame ruse to misdirect us?" Good thing I had the whole team investigated. Keep her in the dungeon, and keep trying to find a way to detect the geese on her and the others we have in custody. If we can find a way to do that, it might lead to a way to remove it without risking the life of the victim. Already done. Jen went to the next file. You'll be pleased to know that Earthen Pride has been running over a lot of ponies in San Palomino. Figuratively, of course. He's stripped the titles of no fewer than a dozen ponies found to be engaging in creative accounting to try and get around his new taxes. When some companies tried to renege on their deal to reduce pollution, he gave them a choice. Either the owners move their primary residence directly downwind of the factories or get fined to the full penalty the contracts called for. The boards accepted the former. Twilight giggled into her cup. Jen put away the file and stole one of Twilight's breakfast cookies. He seems to be good at the job. He's getting the nobility and large companies all riled up, but each time one makes a move, the good Duke has been one step ahead. He keeps this up and he'll climb to the chair of the Imperial Hall in a couple decades by using the others as stepping stones. Well, we can't fault his zeal, Twilight answered. But the others can be vicious in their own right. I hope he's ready. What about Manhattan? Any updates there? Jen nodded. I don't have the file with me, but cleanup and repairs are ahead of schedule. Manhattan does infrastructure like nowhere else, and I'm told Domain is on an anti-changeling warpath. She's fired the police chief and put up rewards for the first to develop technology that can thwart their disguises. Changelings aside, they're certainly doing better than Cloudsdale. I've heard rumors that Cloudsdale's going to give up on a full rebuild and instead decentralize weather control using several smaller cities. Twilight paused her cookie munching. Long term, that may be wise. I'm told more land is going to be annexed to the west of San Palomino and the northwest of Shanghai. We might even get new duchies out of them. Such a shame, though. There was nowhere like Cloudsdale. Too true. Jen got up with a bow. That's about all I have for the moment. Did you need help here? Nah. I know you're busy, and Spike should be back soon with more of the documents I need. Take care of yourself, Jen. Jen bowed again and turned to go. By your leave. She almost bumped into Spike as he entered the room with a pile of scrolls, but he shuffled around her. Oops. Sorry, Jen. Hui, I got the stuff you were looking for. Excellent. Put it over by me. Twilight motioned towards the old map she borrowed from Blueblood. It's time to finish our business in Stalliongrad. Asterisk. Are you sure you want to go through with this meeting? Duke Razbukin grumbled at Twilight. These terrorists should be locked up, not talked with as equals. Twilight put the box she was carrying underneath the dining table, finishing off the last bit of her plan before sampling one of the cookies on the dinner spread. Normally, I would agree. However, given the state of the city, we need every pony working together. I'm willing to reach a compromise for the greater good, but only if they can engage in good faith. I won't tolerate additional duplicity. The rental hall they'd secured was plush with traditional red colors on the carpet, drapes, and seats. The kitchen was granted access to some of the food reserves held by the Duke to whip up a modest feast, even though it was mainly common ingredients that their train had transported from the reserves. Still, that meant there were cookies, and that was enough. The surprise she had waiting was the icing on the cake. The rebel forces arrived moments later, still clad in white. The ones in the back were young and scrawnier than one would normally imagine gruff rebels to be, but Jack himself had some significant muscle. A mare at his side had a white mane and coat, and her face was entirely covered except for her eyes. Some of her bangs were poking out of the wrap covering her, though. Her irises were the color of a deep, cold sea, one could almost see the icebergs in them. Twilight stood and cleared her throat. Every pony, have a seat. Help yourself, and let's get this done for the sake of the city. Jack smiled and hopped into a seat. Didn't know you'd be feeding us. Not poisoned, is it? A burble of indignation escaped the Duke's mouth. Of course not. Twilight bit into another cookie. Not my style. If I wanted you gone, Jackrabbit, I would have borrowed some of Luna's guards. You'd never see it coming. But I'd much rather work with you to rebuild. Yes, this city does need that. Jack started putting together a sandwich. To that end, I want to negotiate for ownership control of the following facilities. He clopped his hooves, and one of the rebels produced a list. Twilight took it and skimmed through the lot. This represents a not insignificant portion of the remaining industry in the city. What makes you think I'm ready to entertain such a demand? Jack laughed through a bite of food. You mean besides the state of the city? I know these places. Studied them in industrial management for years. I can have them up and running in record time. Twilight held up a hoof to stop the Duke from yelling at him. I'm sure you could. After all, your group was the one that did the damage in the first place. Given this list, I wouldn't be surprised if you were quite deliberate about what to damage. Jack did a little bow. Of course. I'm not cruel, Lady Sparkle. The city can recover with what we have planned out, but only if you agree to my terms. If not, well, he waved at one of the goons, who cast a spell. The silent pause was ready to have kittens by the time Jack looked at his thug to ask what was wrong. The rebel shrugged and cast it again. The box underneath Twilight's spot at the table started beeping. What is? Jack went as cold as the weather outside, and his struggle told Twilight all she needed to know. Looking for this. Twilight pulled out the box and opened it. Inside were slightly conical crystals bundled together with a steel band, with a simple core embedded inside the bundle. I found it under one of the more moderately damaged factories. Once I knew which buildings you wanted control of, it was pretty easy to figure out which others were disposable to you, find the bombs, and disable them. Your real name is Jack Hammer Kick. Your ancestor, Jack Rabbit Kick, was a noble who controlled much of Stallionggrad's early industry, before the current line of dukes took control and put in place its centralized system, which is what this is all about. Control of the means of production. Odds are this operation was something you've been planning for some time now. When the Monochreny first started acting strange at the start of winter, you saw your chance. The disruption to food, combined with your sabotage, brought the city to the brink. The system in place, managed by the Duke, along with your own efforts to be careful, all combined to minimize losses while advancing your goals. Your plan was to hide these bombs in the factories you didn't need, and hold them hostage. I believe we have found all of them, as they were generally buried underneath or next to the buildings. Had they detonated, they would not go bang like a typical gunpowder bomb. Rather, they would overcharge the crystals, and the ice that sprouted from them would have moved slowly enough to allow ponies to escape, but would have wrecked the structures. So, how am I doing? Jack blinked and turned a corner of his mouth into a smile. Not bad. But, I still hold the advantage here. You don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. Spike elbowed Cloudburner and whispered, he don't know her very well, do he? Twilight munched on another cookie and washed it down with some milk. Oh, I'm not done yet. Your family's coat of arms predominantly features the color white, which is what inspired your pseudo-uniform here. Once I realized that, I looked into your family's finances. You don't have the kind of money that would be needed to finance this operation. Or at least you shouldn't. Luck, however, was on your side. A relative of yours passed away somewhat recently, perhaps of natural causes, perhaps not. Either way, with no foals of his own, ownership of the property defaulted to you. You didn't need this on paper. Without the old man, all you needed was the key to the property, and someone willing to pay for that. And at this point, enter the Majestics. Some of Jack's crew looked like they were about ready to pass a bowling ball out through where the sun didn't shine. Wait, aren't those the guys they say tried to stage the coup? One of them asked another under his breath. Rainbow gave them a look. That's kind of what you guys are trying to do yourselves, you know. Quiet. Jack growled. Let her speak. Why bother? The Duke stood up and stroked his long beard. If you are in league with them, we should have no business dealing with you. If enough guards were here as I asked, I would have had them gun you down right now. But I suppose I can leave that to the Grand Mage. The entire table jumped when Twilight slammed her hoof into it. Sit down. I am the one calling the shots here, not you. You will wait for me to finish. That is not negotiable. The Duke took a step back as if Twilight had shocked him with a riot prod, then she herself sat back down. As I was saying. Twilight took another drink of milk, and licked off the inevitable mustache. Enter the Majestics. Somehow they caught wind of your idea and made you an offer you couldn't refuse. They would provide the warheads and the money, and all you had to do was turn over the keys to the property. Suddenly, your plan had sprung into action. For almost nothing, you had everything you needed to take back what you saw as rightfully yours, and the Majestics got to feed off of the chaos that ensued, in more ways than one. I'm not certain how much you know about them, but I can tell you this. These giant crystals that have been fashioned into bombs? They were chunks of the ice monochrony itself. Their removal was likely what caused the initial problems with it at the very beginning, and I'm guessing the Majestics only did it to experiment on them. Once those were done, they needed a way to get rid of them before I caught wind and started using them to track them down. And they just happened to know of a certain noble burned by the Stalliongrad system. Jack broke out in laughter and clopped his hooves together in wide, slow strokes. Not bad. Only thing I'd bring up was that I got the ice bombs from a known diamond dog dealer. Didn't understand why he wanted those keys. But that still leaves us at the same place. I can run the factories better than this old coot can, and my guys will only back off on my say-so. Twilight leaned back in her chair and scowled. You do realize the only reason I'm even listening to you is because of the state of the city, right? Any other scenario, and you'd already be in the dungeon in the capital. You'd never see daylight again. But we're here, aren't we? Jack pulled his chair in. Wouldn't it be easier to work with me instead of fighting? I'm not really asking all that much. What you're asking is I ignore your incredibly long list of crimes. Twilight sighed. But the situation is the situation. I'll agree to your terms, if... Are you mad? Razbukin kicked the table, and the cookies all jumped. This is insanity. You're giving permission to every radical group out there to attack the crown. It'll be anarchy. Twilight glared, lighting her horn. Leave. Now. The Duke was all but foaming at the mouth. You can't exclude me from this. It's my duchy. The system must be protected. Jack stood, and the rest of his posse followed suit. Your system is much too rigid. It's basically slavery, and it can't handle what's been happening to this city. Enough. The voice had every pony's eyes open in shock, and Twilight pointed a hoof at Jack. You, shut up. Duke, leave now or I'll have Rainbow drag you out by your beard. Fah. Razbukin tossed one of the plates and stormed out, leaving a trail of foul curses behind him before slamming the door behind him. As I was saying. Twilight sighed and clopped her hoof, which had Spike produce some sheets of paper. I'll agree to your terms, but I'm going to place strict expectations on your progress, and you will be paid fair, crown-set prices for what you produce. If you don't perform, you're going to jail. If you continue your insurrection, you're going to jail. You and your crew are going to be the absolute best pillars of the community, or you'll all be going to jail. And I promise you, if you cross the crown ever again, I'll find the deepest, darkest hole I can find and stuff you in it permanently. Clear. Jack smiled and gave her a bow. Those terms are acceptable. You have my word. Twilight pulled out a pen. And it's going to be in writing. Asterisk. Signed contract in her bag, Twilight left the room and the celebrating rebels behind. Spike and Cloud were staying behind to keep an eye on them, while Rainbow and Trixie were flanking her as she marched to the other side of the building. Inside a secure room with a privacy shield, the Duke was waiting over a plate with crumbs on it. "Did they buy it?" he asked. "Starter, main, and dessert." Twilight chuckled. "RGIS is going to have a field day watching them. Hopefully we get some great intel out of this. If the Majestics try to silence them, we should make sure we have some surprises ready. Think your police have any ponies we can trust?" Razbukin stroked his beard. "Oh yes, I know some. Asterisk. It was still winter and very cold in Canterlot, but nowhere near as bad as Stalliongrad. The warmth of the castle was a supremely welcome change from the last few days." Twilight was knee-deep in reports and logs to record what had happened in the Red Duchy and to follow up with questions from RGIS. With luck, she'd get some time to spend in Ponyville soon. But for the time being, she was content with being warm and fuzzy and buried in blankets. Probability suggested that the knock Twilight heard at the door wasn't the first one, lost as she was in her focus. "Enter." The door went ka-chunk and a muzzle poked itself in. "Lady Sparkle? It's Arcane Edge. We, have a little problem and could use your help." Twilight pushed down a blanket to get a better view of the door. "A problem you need me for?" "I don't hear any panic in your voice, so I doubt it's an immediate life-threatening thing. What's up?" "UFH." Arcane swallowed. "This is embarrassing, but our sovereign is in her room and not answering our knocks. Not even for her pulsar. We dare not enter her domain without her permission, and her sister is busy in the Imperial Hall and has asked for her presence. You two are close, so maybe you could enter and talk to her." Twilight chewed on her pen. "That's unlike her. Yeah, I'll go see if she's in there or left for some reason." Fortunately, Arcane had bowed and backed away before he could see Twilight trip on a blanket and fall flat on her face. She might have had to do something unpleasant to swear him to secrecy. Kicking her legs free, she trotted down the hall, past a statue like Arcane and past Celestia's room, and knocked on Luna's door. As reported, there was no answer. "Luna." She grabbed hold of the door and gave it a little push. The inside had a flickering glow, but not that of fire. "Luna? Are you in here?" She leaned on the door to push it open, and took a few steps inside. She had to blink a few times to get her eyes to adjust to the darker lighting, and found Luna sitting on her bed, eyes focused entirely on a screen obviously taken from Glayson's city of Crystal Vale. She had her forehooves on two holographic panels, and was moving them around. On the screen was something like a movie, though it didn't take long for Twilight to connect that Luna's movement and the movies were connected. "Luna." No response. After another blink, she saw some kind of devices on her ears. So, she stood in front of her. "Luna. Wake up." Luna leaned left and right to try to see around her. "Out of the way, Twilight. I'm almost to the boss." There was a beat. "Oh, pony feathers." Luna tore off the ear devices and said some things you wouldn't expect of a princess if you didn't know Luna. "What time is it?" "I was supposed to be in the Imperial Hall at 3. A large, white princess cleared her throat behind Twilight. "It's 4:30. Twilight looked straight up at the chin of an angry sister. "I should have known you'd find some video games to smuggle in from Crystal Vale. Did you even do all the things you said you'd do? Establish a time-locked teleport beacon? Repair the defenses? Set up protocols that could counter flicker? Update Canterlot's wards?" Luna threw her head back in a groan. "Stars, yes, 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 and yes. It's been 4,000 years, Tia. 4,000 years. 1 millennium of which was spent in the moon. I'd like to think I've earned a little time with the Super Plumber brothers." Thud. Twilight flinched from a solar hoof slamming into the marble floor next to her. not at the expense of managing the country. Brush your mane and tail and get your sorry flank on your throne before I toss your toy into a volcano. Luna pressed a pillow down on her head. Fin. I'll be there in 5. Celestia leaned down and met Twilight's eyes. I do apologize that you had to see that, Twilight. If you have time, the hall would hear your testimony on Stalliongrad later this evening. Do you think you could have something ready after supper recess? Twilight blinked and rearranged her marbles. Yeah. I mean, yes. My reports are basically done, I can have some copies made and talk about it. Wonderful. I'll see you then. Celestia glanced back at Luna. 5 minutes. Author's note. A chapter posted on time? Is CV getting back on schedule? Here's hoping, folks. Next chapter starts the next mission, which is the final mission of Book 2. I hope you all enjoy. Thanks again for sticking with me. CV. End author's note. End of Chapter 99. Cauterize.